Imagine standing in the heart of the eternal city, staring at a marble sundial at exactly noon, only to realize the shadow has vanished. The sun is directly overhead, yet the air is biting cold, and the light casting down is the sickly, dim hue of an eclipsed moon. It is the middle of summer, but your breath plumes in the air. You look up, and the sun has lost its radiance, reduced to a pale blue disk that you can stare at without squinting. This was not a nightmare, nor a scene from a dystopian fiction. This was the recorded reality of a Roman statesman named Cassiodorus, who wrote with mounting dread about a year when the seasons seemed to blend together into one continuous, freezing twilight. We are obsessed with the end of the world. We make movies about asteroids, nuclear fallout, and sudden climatic shifts, thinking of these as future threats. But the chilling truth, locked in the frozen archives of glaciers and the twisted rings of ancient trees, is that the apocalypse has already happened. The worst year to be alive in human history was not during the bloody trenches of the First World War, nor the devastating peak of the Black Death. The true nadir of human existence began in the year 536. I am going to take you on a forensic journey back to the moment the sky broke, revealing a global murder mystery that scientists and historians have only just recently solved. To understand the sheer terror of this moment, we have to look at the world just before the lights went out. The global superpower of the West, the Byzantine Empire, was thriving under Emperor Justinian. Trade routes were pumping spices, silks, and grain across continents. Humanity felt secure, much like we do today, relying on complex networks of agriculture and commerce. The English-speaking world today shares this exact same vulnerability, a deep reliance on invisible supply chains and a delicate infrastructure that we assume will simply always work. But this security was a fragile illusion. Sometime early in the year 536, a mysterious veil crept across the sky, blanketing the Northern Hemisphere. The great Byzantine historian Procopius noted with immense alarm that the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during the whole year. He wrote that men were free neither from war, nor pestilence, nor any other thing leading to death. Imagine waking up tomorrow and the sun just never fully rises. The morning fog never burns off. The noon feels like dusk, and it stays that way for 18 agonizing months. The immediate consequence of this atmospheric shroud was a catastrophic plunge in global temperatures. Summer never arrived. Snow fell in the middle of August in China, destroying the harvest and leaving millions to starve. In Ireland, the Gaelic scribes who kept the annals of Ulster recorded a terrifyingly simple entry for that year, noting a complete failure of bread. We know from the ancient chronicles that the chilling darkness spared almost no one. The ancient cultures in South America experienced dramatic climate shifts that led to the collapse of their fisheries and agriculture. The sheer scale of the anomaly points to an event so massive it fractured the climate system of the entire planet. For generations, modern historians read these ancient accounts and dismiss them as poetic exaggeration or religious allegory. They assumed the chroniclers were being dramatic about a bad storm or a local famine. But history is not just written in ink. It is written in the earth. The breakthrough in this ancient cold case came not from dusty libraries, but from the frigid laboratories of modern glaciology and dendrochronology. Scientists began drilling deep into the ancient ice sheets of Greenland and the high glaciers of the Swiss Alps, extracting cylindrical cores of ice that act as a perfectly preserved timeline of the Earth's atmosphere. Every year, snow falls and traps microscopic particles of dust, gas, and chemicals, freezing them in distinct layers. At the same time, botanists examine the fossilized remains of ancient oak trees preserved in the peat bogs of Ireland. Trees grow a new ring every year, and the width of that ring tells the story of the weather. When researchers looked at the tree rings for the year 536, the rings were shockingly narrow, indicating almost zero growth. And when the glaciologists reached the corresponding layer of ice, they found something that made their blood run cold. Buried in the frost was a massive spike of volcanic glass shards and high concentrations of sulfur and bismuth. The ancient historians were not exaggerating. They were reporting the terrifying, literal facts of a volcanic winter. Somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere, most likely in Iceland or perhaps North America, a volcano of apocalyptic proportions had violently erupted. It blasted millions of tons of sulfur dioxide gas high into the stratosphere. Once there, the gas reacted with water vapor to form a dense layer of sulfate aerosols. This microscopic veil spread rapidly across the globe, acting like a giant planetary mirror that reflected the sun's radiation back into space. The Earth was suddenly plunged into a deep freeze. Average summer temperatures across Europe and Asia plummeted by almost 3 degrees Celsius. It does not sound like much, but a sudden drop of that magnitude is enough to shatter the delicate agricultural cycles that keep human civilization alive. Crops simply stopped growing. The psychological terror of watching the sky turn gray and the soil freeze in July must have been absolute. People starved, not by the thousands, but by the millions. But the horror of 536 was only the opening act. The Earth had been deeply wounded, and before it could heal, the planet was struck again. The ice cores reveal that just 4 years later, in 540, a second massive volcanic eruption occurred, followed by yet another in 547. It was a relentless bombardment from the Earth itself. The back-to-back eruptions created a compound crisis, an era of unprecedented cold and darkness that scientists now call the late antique Little Ice Age. The psychological toll of this unending gloom must have been unbearable. People believed the gods had abandoned them. They believed the end of days had arrived. And in many ways, they were right, because the freezing darkness was about to invite a far more intimate killer into their homes. Famine weakens the body. When millions of people are malnourished, huddled together for warmth and freezing rain, their immune systems crash. The blocked sun and the failing crops laid the perfect groundwork for a biological nightmare. In the year 541, just 5 years after the sky went dark, a new horror emerged from the trade port of Pelusium in Egypt. It traveled on the backs of rats, hiding deep within the grain ships that normally fed the empire. It was Yersinia pestis, the bacteria responsible for the bubonic plague. Today we know it as the Justinian plague. Because the population was already starved and broken by the volcanic winter, the plague tore through the Mediterranean basin with a ferocity that defies comprehension. The pathogen exploited the weakened state of humanity, spreading rapidly along the very trade routes that had once been the source of the empire's wealth. The death toll was staggering. At its peak, the plague was killing up to 10,000 people a day in Constantinople alone. Bodies piled up in the streets, in the churches, and in massive open pits. The empire lost perhaps half of its population. The vibrant, interconnected world of late antiquity completely shattered. Tax revenues collapsed, armies dissolved, and entire cities were abandoned to the encroaching forests. This was not a gradual decline. It was a sudden, violent severing of the arteries of civilization. The darkness in the sky literally brought about the Dark Ages, dragging humanity into centuries of stagnation and survival. The trauma of this period was so profound that it permanently altered the trajectory of human history, shifting the balance of power, destroying old empires, and paving the way for the fractured world that eventually birthed modern Western society. When we look back at the cascade of catastrophes that began in 536, the true terror is not found in the mechanics of the volcano or the biology of the plague. The true terror lies in the realization of our own extreme vulnerability. We have built a modern world that relies on just-in-time supply chains, precise agricultural cycles, and a stable climate. We sit in brightly lit rooms, ordering food from across the globe with a tap on a glass screen, believing that our technology has elevated us above the cruel whims of nature. We assume that the supermarket shelves will always be full, and that the sun will always warm the earth. But the deep ice remembers the truth. The twisted tree rings locked in the ancient bogs of Ireland remember the truth. They stand as a silent testament to how quickly the facade of civilization can crack. Nature possesses the power to blindfold the sun and starve the earth with zero warning. A stray geological event, a pressure valve bursting deep beneath an oceanic ridge, is all it takes to plunge our hyper-connected society into absolute chaos. The survival of humanity in the 6th century was a near thing. Those who lived through the endless winter and the choking plague endured a level of suffering that we can barely comprehend today. They watched the sky betray them, and then they watched their own bodies betray them. They were forced to navigate a world that had suddenly turned hostile, a world where the most basic promise of tomorrow, the rising of a warm sun, had been brutally revoked. Their nightmare is a mirror reflecting our own hidden fragility as we navigate our own era of uncertainty, facing modern pandemics and unpredictable climate shifts. The shadows of the year 536 stretch across the centuries to serve as a grave warning. The Earth is not a static backdrop to human ambition. It is a volatile, breathing entity, capable of resetting the board whenever it chooses. We must learn from the resilience of those who walked through the darkest valley of human history, but we must also respect the fragile balance that keeps the darkness at bay. The ancient dust trapped in the ice tells a story we cannot afford to ignore, a story of how quickly everything we know can vanish into the mist. If this deep dive into the darkest chapter of our past sent a chill down your spine, and you want to continue exploring the hidden, terrifying truths of human history, hit that subscribe button. The past is not dead, and its greatest mysteries are still waiting to be uncovered.